Okay, cool.
I like those anyway. Just to warm up,
Me
I
too.
guess.
Me too. I'm recording, by the way.
Sure.
Motivation. I was thinking about motivation recently and the concept. Like, is motivation a feeling? Because people say, "Oh, I'm not motivated, but I did it anyway." So they're like, that kind of dispels the idea that it's a feeling. But can you ever be motivated by something and you're completely devoid of any feeling? Like, what do you see motivation as referring to?
Motivations, that's harder to define because, um, well, how can we think about motivation? One could be a feeling, a desire to do, a desire to seek something.
Yeah,
So to want is to feel motivated,
right.
like a reason to act. Another aspect of motivation could be like the ease in which you can start acting and moving. Like when people are depressed, they say they like getting out of bed is hard enough. Like, but that might just be an aspect of um, motivation. Might be a way of just identifying the value of something.
Yeah, I mean,
I
the
mean,
getting out of bed example makes me think of energy rather than motivation, but I don't know.
yeah,
Maybe they're linked.
yeah. I
Um,
think it really all connects down to value, like seeing a value and seeking it, value recognition, things like that. But even within psychology, like to have a motivation usually implies there's something you seek out, some goal in mind. So having motivations is about like being able to recognize that goal and desiring it on some level
mm.
or seeking it out.
So that to me, that would imply there is some level of feeling. I want
Yeah,
X, so I must do Y, even though I don't
yeah,
feel like doing Y.
yeah. But then you could also quantify like how strongly you seek it out and how strongly you had that feeling. I would say it's mostly a feeling. They say I have motivation. You're talking about a feeling, but when you talk about motivations in general, you
Yeah,
might just be referring to goals. Like
right.
the motivation of seeking food is to satiate hunger. I mean, we can identify the hunger as the motivator, and it's motivated to for food. And usually, the psychology comes in when how do we satisfy our goals, or what makes us seek those goals.
Yeah, and I assume so. Goals are motivated, but then, for example, let's say someone wants to write a book, and they're like, "I really don't feel like sitting down to write today. I'm not motivated at all," and they write. Are they there? Can you say them? I mean, I guess we have to separate, like you mentioned, there's two different senses in which you use the word. One is you've got really strong desire and excitement for doing some specific task. Another is means something else, which is what we're concerned with the other term. That's not the super strong feeling. But in the case of that person where they don't have the very strong desire, but they say they do it anyway. They just sit down, they write, they start working on their book. Is that motivated action?
I would still say it's motivated. You might say that the intensity is less. We can talk about the intensity of the motivation. Like, I mean, it's a desiring, a motivation is a desiring. Like a motivation is like your reason for acting.
Can you be motivated though by a thought devoid of feeling?
I doubt it. Like I'm trying to think. We usually talk about motivations because there's a feeling with it. There's a
Right.
sensation. There's a something there. If you just had a thought devoid of a feeling, it would
Okay.
be like what would be the motivation itself? I mean, like the sense of motivation is absolutely internal sense of motivation. We might be able to distinguish between motivations within ourselves, like of feelings and sensations, and also motivations outside ourselves, like things we seek or act towards, or walk towards or move towards.
Can you explain that? Sorry, I didn't follow that distinction. So there are desires you have that are inside yourself, and then I didn't quite get that.
Trying to think of a way to put this. It really is how you break down the question. I guess we think motivations we're referring to when people say, like, I don't feel motivated, but I'm going to do it anyway. What do
Yeah.
they mean when they say they don't feel motivated? I guess they'll say they're referring to some way of goal-directed action. Distinguish that way at first. Like, we're talking about goals and things like that, and that's how we want to maybe break it down further. Or other ways of goal-oriented action. Like, what does it mean to have a goal-oriented action? Like, I mean, there's values implied in there. There's volition implied in there.
Is a goal-orientated action the same as a motivated action? Or is goal-orientated the same as motivated? Is that an equivalent term? Or does it imply motivated?
Maybe not necessarily. Like, goal-oriented could be like, I know ants seek out.
Oh, a computer program could be goal-orientated, right? Like a machine learning.
Too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's oriented to accomplish something. Then we can make further distinctions, like motivation is something like a volitional agent or conscious agent would have. And we're trying to refer to like those sort of actions, but we're not just saying there are actions you take and decide to take. We're trying to connote the value relationship that when you say you're motivated, you're usually like, I'm seeking a value in some way or other.
Yeah. The question is whether there's actually, I think there might be a Borges story that's relevant, which is the immortal or something. Maybe we can. Let me just see. Talks about a character who mistakenly achieves immortality and then, weary of a long life, struggles to lose it and writes an account of his experience. I don't know. Maybe I'll check that out later. Maybe that could be relevant to this question.
That's Ayn Rand's also, like, her idea of the immortal robot. Like,
yeah.
It doesn't value anything. Like, value pertains to what you can, like, there's alternatives. Like, your life implies either you go towards death or life. And if there's nothing there, if it's just happened, like, there's no motivation, there's no values even.
Maybe we can add that story to our analysis. But so your take is that all motivated action has to have some desire behind it. It can't be emotionless.
Yes.
All right.
That's how I've reasoned it out.
I need to think about it because sometimes I don't know. I can't. It's not obvious to me that do you think you always have an emotion present? Like sometimes I'm not sure if I can't feel any emotion, and so I'm like, well, isn't it possible then to be emotionless in some ways?
I could just say small intensity, just a weak intensity.
Yeah, okay. I find that
still
difficult
there, but
yeah, okay.
I mean, really what I'm pointing out here is the thinking process, like the way I break down the problem, like usually maybe categorizing it first, like goal-oriented action, then trying to see the different distinctions and break it down from there rather than just jumping right into what do people mean. Like, it's important to break down the meaning of the concept first, and then we could do it. It's an easier job to figure it out and think about it and consider it.
So motivation is value-orientated action. Well, it's not action. It's not action actually, but it's value-orientated. That's what we know. That's all we know. It's got something to do with values and humans. Well, actually,
or
an animal can be. Yeah, consciousness. Okay. Oh, okay. What about like sometimes you do things by habit. Like for example, I might brush my teeth, but I don't feel anything. I'm just like, that's an automatic thing, I'm going to bed, brushing teeth. Could you say, is that motivated or is that just habit? Like if you habituate something and it becomes like a almost permanent fixture, obviously you can change it, but it's just a thing you do in response to a cue. Is that motivated?
Is it motivated? That one's hard to say. I mean, it originates from a motivated process. I mean, you are motivated to get that. I mean, in some sense, you are.
Yeah.
You can motivated to, activate the routine, so to speak. Like, yeah, the moment of brushing might lack any particular emotion. You might even ignore it or overlook it, but you had to at least decide at the point to be motivated to go to the bathroom and to grab your toothbrush, like that initial action. Like when we distinguish between like when do you make the choice for free will? I mean, like you're still motivated at some level. You're motivated to at least make the way to the bathroom, to then brush your teeth. You might
Well, I
not
mean,
say.
it's not as clear to me, right? This thing, motivation, is a fairly slippery term, like, because I can't notice like myself feeling any, I don't know. It's so hard to notice like, oh, here is this thing called motivation that I feel, oh, that's the thing. Especially if we're speaking about habit.
Yeah. I'm thinking of other.
We've got some, let's see, I'm pulling out some related questions here that I think we can, yeah, I mean, if you've got any other thoughts, we can go to that. But I was just saying, like, I probably need to think more about this too, like alone as well.
I think that's the most I have at the moment.
All right,
I would just keep breaking it down further from what we have done, but that's usually my process of doing it.
Okay, let me just get here a notepad, which we might explore right after this motivation thing, because it's okay. This is from another notepad, and it's going to be kind of messy. So if the spelling's off, just let's see. What else is in here? Okay, here's a quote from Ito. Oh, wait, we got more. I got some thoughts on this too. I think it's more complex than the initial question I asked. Just so I don't forget, I'll put this point in here. Let's see what else I got. So I got this one. And this is, I mean, this will cover later anyway, this quote that I'm about to put in. It's about definitions.
Mm-hmm. Which
right, let's go. Look, this is from the definitions chapter, but I mean, I've got obviously got, like, if you just look, this is what I've covered so far. So, and that's 19 pages of questions for you, which I hope you're excited for. So yeah, this is, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Like, this is what she's talking about here, right? Like, most people proceed by the road of approximations. I mean, just look at us talk about motivation and how unclear it is to me. And then yet there are so many concepts like that I'll use. And I'm like, I kind of know what I mean. Like, maybe it's a bit of feeling, maybe it's some of that. And obviously she's saying that, this is the extreme of people who are just going by facial expressions and emotional vibrations of their elders, but the majority adopt a mixture of different degrees of three methods. Like the first method, which I didn't paste in here, was like trying to really clarify everything, like not giving up until you fully understand what the concept refers to. And so, I mean, this is the definitions part, but I'm just like, does this question make sense to you? Because I'll explain it. It's a messily put together thing.
Do you have a link, or did I bookmark it?
Oh, it's in the, I might not. Oh, I forgot. I'm not sharing screen. Sorry. I thought I was sharing screen for some reason. Yeah, okay. I thought you were watching what I was doing. Okay, never mind. Here we go.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you were the whole time you were watching this, but
Where's it? Maybe.
so this is the quote I just mentioned, and then these are I didn't edit these, so I just pasted it now because it's relevant. So I might need to explain it because it's just randomly quickly put together stuff. We can start with this one.
This, in a way, I think it's okay. This made me think of, just to start off, it made me think of Socrates, because he would always ask like these questions. Just, does anyone really know what they're talking about? It's like, if you, what is justice? And he'll go on for hours just until you just give up. I mean, trying to reveal like nobody knows anything, and I'm the wisest because I'm the only one who truly knows things. And that's what made me think of, like, on some level, I think it's a bit right that it's why Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living, because at some level, yes, you can't get self-knowledge if you don't really know what the hell you're talking about. You might be vague, but you won't really know at all. And I think on some level, I think that's true. I mean, we can have some knowledge, and people have some understanding, but
You know, you just reminded me of, I told a friend about this issue I had about at what point is something this kind of thing. And she mentioned Archimedes' boat. So that was already written about, you know, like at what point does the boat sink? Who sinks the boat?
yeah,
There are people so people have thought about it before, which is cool. It just reminded me, sorry, it's not fully
yeah,
relevant, but all these discussions.
yeah.
Okay,
So
so
go ahead.
yeah, I mean, I agree with you if I think what you said is that it does capture something. Like there's definitely a lot missing if you don't understand the word. But it's not like when you know, if you're talking about like approximations, and it's not like every concept is a complete null. Like even if I say, for example, oh, humans are these things that have thumbs and they move around, and like it's not like you're not, you know, it's not like you're not capturing any information. It's not like, oh, humans are angels. You know what I'm saying? So it's like your brain is grabbing onto something. It's just, I don't know if that means you have necessarily productive thoughts, but probably not. It's not like you're thinking nothing, basically.
Right.
It goes to this quote actually, because I wasn't sure I agreed with this, but we can. Yeah, I mean, like, okay, here's the example I give you. I once asked a friend, what do you think understanding is? She was like, oh, well, it's, you know, when you can, you know, use something that you learned, or it's like, you know, when you know it deeply, something like that. It was kind of vague. And, you know, I mean, obviously one characteristic of understanding is that you can put into action the knowledge you have acquired. Like it means you are able to apply it to practical real world situations. That's the characteristic of understanding, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a
It's hard to.
characteristic. It's a characteristic of, but it's not
Yes.
not necessarily the defining characteristic, and it's not necessarily. It's not, for example, it doesn't, that won't tell you that understanding might mean contextually integrating a piece of knowledge with all other knowledge. It might not tell you that it means reducing it to validate that it's actually reality based and going through a process of doing that, like trying to connect it with real world concretes. But it does, like, part of understanding is obviously applying it. But then, so if your concept of understanding is this thing of like, oh, you know, it's this thing where like you can use what you learn, or you have a, you know, you kind of like, you can put it in your own words. Maybe that's someone's understanding, when you can put it in your own words. But then doesn't that mean when you read a book, what you're essentially relying on is a feeling based on that? Oh, I get it. Yeah, it's like I can see myself using this, you know, like Nassim Taleb says, anti-fragile, we need to be anti-fragile, and therefore we need to reduce complexity. So, you know, like it just means I've got to simplify things down. That's that. Now I understand anti-fragile. And so do you think that if we have these concepts that are vague like this, then we're at risk of just relying on feeling like, oh yeah, I feel like I understand that. But the feeling is, we know feelings don't necessarily reflect reality, right? And so that leaves us at risk of being delusional, walking around delusionally, thinking we're like getting things right, but we're just speaking these words that are grammatically correct and don't actually mean anything as far as do they correspond to reality or not. What are your
I would
thoughts on
think
that?
that's a case for where it's one of those words that function better on a continuum, like on a continuum of how much knowledge you have of something, where you could have a very basic understanding. Like a kid knows what a dog is, like it has four legs and it barks, and that's all they really have. It's not much of an understanding of dogs at all as compared to, say, a vet who studies canines specifically, and even maybe specifically Labradors or something. Like their understanding is much more extensive and elaborate and broad, and covers more context, covers more ground. I think on some level it's important to understand or to recognize how much knowledge you have of something. That's one way it can benefit to quantify your degree of understanding or knowledge. Because you could say, how much can you claim about it? Like if you know you have a child's level understanding of dogs, you won't be able to claim very much about them other than that they bark and they have four legs. You might not be able to say much more than that. Well, you don't have evidence for anything else. As opposed to, say, you study dogs for 10 years in a veterinarian program, or 10 years of your life, you study dogs. You can claim a lot more and you have a deeper understanding because, well, you've just had more time to learn and more to learn about. And you could validate and all that other stuff on top of it.
Yeah, I feel like that might be a different context though, because there are like, I guess maybe, I'm not sure, but maybe there are two senses of the concept understanding. So one is humankind's understanding or knowledge thus far on this specific entity or thing. And then there's like understanding on a continuum for the person, like given their context of knowledge, do they understand this or not? And it's that, because you can definitely differentiate, like let's say someone who looks at humans and says, okay, they're thumb havers, or they're like, what, she gave some funny examples of people talking about humans, or like poetry writing animals. There's a difference between someone saying that and someone saying, okay, man is a rational animal, and then listing out like, okay, he's a rational animal because he builds houses, he can sit on computers, he studies physics, he writes poetry, he speaks in language, which are symbols for concepts. Like there's a difference there, right? And you don't necessarily need to be versus someone who's like, I mean this in a different sense. So that's that example in your context was someone who's like a biologist and studies humans and knows the details of how their cells work and move around the body and the physiology and I would say that it's almost two different senses of the term understanding. Would you agree with that?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's still the same concept, of course. It's just applied differently. And I think that is relevant. But that's more how I would characterize that.
And then, so then going back to my example of like, how are we functioning if we have these kind of vague concepts where we're just left with, if you kind of know what you mean, then you're essentially relying on feeling some of the time, maybe not all the time, to judge whether or not, let's say you've got understanding of something you've read. You're just going by a feeling. You're not actually able to consciously validate it. And then, so can't you apply that same thing to many other concepts we use, like justice, to whatever else? What's another one that might come up a lot? Thinking, he owes me this, or I guess that falls under justice, or they owe me that. Knowledge, like, can't you, if our grasp of these concepts is so vague, aren't we just driven by whim most of the time?
I mean,
What else could we be driven by if we don't have explicit knowledge of the thing?
Yeah, emotion really. I mean, yeah, to the extent that you can't make sense of it, or to the extent that it isn't thought about, yeah, I think yes, it would be emotion driven.
Okay. Well, I mean, we can go with more emotion driven because, like I
Yes.
mentioned, with that with the person describing understanding, it's not like they're not able to consciously sum up any characteristic at all that is representative of understanding. Like if they say, understanding is when I can use something that I learned. Like, well, I mean, that's part of what understanding is, right? So they are capturing something.
Yeah.
So, but I guess, so you would agree with me then that the more vague you are, the more wind-based you are in the use of that concept.
Yeah. That
Okay.
sounds right.
Hmm. Um,
Or it's just difficult to use it in any other way. Rather, like if it's vague, then it's unruly and difficult to use. Like it's just a lot of guesswork and probably emotion.
right. And then what about self-knowledge? Like, we use, like, for example, I'll give you an example I can think of. Let's say you're walking, you've gone to a party and you met someone that you liked, and you're like, that's the quality I like. I like intellect. You've done an introspection. You're like, I like intellect. And then 2 months later, you meet someone with intellect or what you consider intellect, but you don't like them. And so I know this is a simplified example because obviously people have multiple characteristics and like there are different things. But my point is like you've isolated intellect in that case and you've isolated intellect in another case. And then now there's this person who has intellect, but at the same time, I feel like they don't have intellect. And there's a conflict in, I've experienced something similar to this where you're using a certain concept and you're like, that person has this quality, that person has this quality. I say this person has this quality, but I don't feel they do. And so suddenly your understanding of yourself is based on these concepts that you use to make assumptions about what you like, what you don't like, but the concepts are vague. So what are the implications for our self-knowledge then of vague concepts? What are your thoughts on?
That it would be hard to understand what it is you want. It'd be hard to understand what should be a value. It'd be hard to understand your relationship with others. It's just the more vague it is, the more you don't know why you like someone. But you could have your relationship problems with that, like misunderstanding how somebody treating you nice doesn't necessarily imply much about them or what they think of you. I mean, you don't want. It's important to understand distinctions like degrees of friendship, degrees of romance, degrees of all sorts of feelings. If we're vague, it would be hard to distinguish,
do
like
you
make distinctions.
do you think that obviously in sometimes when you're speaking to someone in the real in like a situation where you're there and you're in concrete, it's like a concrete experience. It's right now, right here, and you do pick up on things and that are real. But then do you think if your concepts are kind of vague and you don't have a way to accurately label it, you then just forget what it was because you're like trying to sum up a whole unique thing that is there, but you have no accurate, precise concept to capture it. You've got vague concepts. Do you think you're more likely to then forget what it
Yes.
was?
Yeah, you're
Okay.
more like, I would for sure. I would
All
say
right.
so.
Wow.
And
Okay.
that's not
So,
really implied by Ayn Rand or anything, but given what I say about concepts and memory is a lot to do with accessing your concepts. By saying that they're vague, you're also saying it's hard to find concrete examples. It's hard to find those emotionally powerful images in your head. And if you
right.
don't have those, you're not going to remember as well. And if you
Yeah.
did have those, you'll remember better.
Right. Okay.
Having the symbol as the concept makes all the difference. That's what helps you retain it all. If you didn't have that retention, you might get confused. Or was it that I liked about them, or was it the way they talked, or the subjects they talked about, or the way they responded to me? Like It's just
Right.
vague in your recollection. Like, what
Right.
about their intellect was it? It's
Right.
just vague in your head.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the thing is like, if you can't label it in the moment in accurately and precisely because your concepts are vague, um, meaning you're in the case of intellect, let's go with that. In one situation, you'd consider something intellect, but in another, you'd consider a contradictory aspect intellect. And so obviously the way you can't, it's a mess. Like how can you possibly work out over time what it is you liked in any given situation you were in if the the patterns were like different? That's pretty vague,
Yeah,
but
it just be messy, just
yeah.
really messy. And the
Okay.
cleaner it is, the better it is. The cleaner it is, the easier it is to think.
And what about as far as self-talk goes, which is I think common in psychology? Like, you know, my thread where I posted that, at what point do you become X or Y? Like when someone says, oh, I'm such an idiot, I don't even know what, I don't say that to myself anymore, but I used to ages ago. I don't say any of that. But like, I, I wonder then, you know, if your concepts are vague when you call yourself something, like, what does that do? Like, if you don't even know what it is, what's going, all you know is it's something bad. So let's say someone says, oh, I'm so stupid. Um, what does stupid mean? Like if they have a vague, it just means something bad. And so that is it equivalent to them telling themselves, oh, I'm such a bad person? And then
Probably.
encoding that emotionally?
It's
Okay.
almost like creating low self-esteem because
Okay.
you're framing it as you're not able to act competently. You're not able to think. And maybe the problem about that too is usually calling something stupid is a lot easier to figure out than saying it's a good idea or something. It's almost like imagine you had so many examples of what you think is stupid that it's like the clearest thing in the world to you when something is stupid, and it's like almost like reinforcing it in your head. Like you're thinking about stupidity so clearly that's almost like all you can see anymore. That's kind of how I would think of it.
Yeah.
Like
I
you
mean,
it's the
like,
one thing you have understanding of. You never bothered to understand intelligence, and anything else you're just left with only the negative.
but I guess like what I was thinking about was, if you don't know what it is, even if you don't know what stupidity is, for example, then, and you're kind of like vaguely labeling, let's say you drop a cup on the floor, which to me is a human,
Yeah.
like these things happen, they don't matter. Like I think yesterday I smashed some big glass by mistake, but I don't care. I'm just like, oh, okay, I have to pick this up. Um, but let's say someone does that and they say, oh, I'm such an idiot or whatever. Like, I wonder if the concept there is off, and so they're just essentially calling themselves, "Oh, I'm such a bad person." That's what they're encoding.
Yeah, I think yeah, I think sometimes that happens.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that
And
seems to explain why negative self-talk is bad because it's almost like confirming or
but
poor thinking makes you associate it with random things. Like you're just associating it with being bad, being incompetent, being incapable as a person.
would you think it would be accurate for me to then reduce that to a misapprehension of reality? So the cause of their issue is that they're not properly perceiving reality, meaning they have such a vague concept of idiot or whatever it is they call themselves. I can't remember that. Now suddenly they're dropping a cup and they're subsuming that under the concept idiot. So they know idiot in their mind is emotionally associated with bad, and then so they're like, now they're a bad person due to their misapprehension of reality. Do you think that would be
Yeah.
okay?
Probably overgeneralization as well. That you do one thing bad, one thing wrong, it makes you somehow unable to think well at all. Like I've made stupid mistakes like on math, but I don't associate that with me being all of a sudden incapable of thinking.
Right,
Like I say, oh,
right,
that's stupid, but I understand why, and
right.
I'm not overgeneralizing it to everything I think about means I'm is just as bad. Just like, oh, I made a mistake. It's to conserve the context. And you could be right. There's also misapprehending what it refers to.
Because if you didn't misapprehend, why would you'd be like, it would be like saying, oh, I'm an elephant when you drop a glass. You're like, well, no, I'm not an elephant. I know what an elephant is. If you had the same kind of preciseness to idiot, you might not even be capable of, you'd be like, that doesn't make any sense to call myself idiot now. So that
Yeah,
would be an example of misapprehension of reality.
yeah.
Okay.
It's the difference between doing a stupid thing and saying you're a stupid person. I mean, there's clearly a difference between just
Correct.
one act versus repeated acts.
This goes
Even
back to
then,
at what point are you and the Archimedes boat, same idea. But
yes.
this is now, but we're assuming now that someone already has the concept properly, in this case.
Yeah.
To get to that point of asking themselves that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, I'm on the right track here. I am seeing that, wow, like this stuff is life and death in some way.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why Brandon wrote about self-esteem. Like, that's his thing. That's his research area. That's his expertise.
Yeah. But it's amazing that we're like, I mean, I'm on a lot of things. I'm like, I kind of know what I mean. More advanced concepts anyway. Like obviously cup. I think she says in one of the chapters, like there are some first level hierarchy type abstractions like cup, table that we actually conceptualized them before we even had, like a vocabulary for say supports or shelf or whatever. And so it's so well automated that we can't explain how we did it. But if we're talking about other things like idiot or intelligence or whatever people call themselves, I don't know, strong, courageous, like that's where it all becomes much more, I kind of know what I mean. And I'm surprised we function at all. Like, I'm just surprised that, oh, well, somehow we're like, I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about half the time, but I'm here and I'm having a conversation with Louis. What's going on?
Yeah. I mean, that must have been what Socrates felt like. He felt everyone's like, nobody knows anything at all. Nobody understands what they're talking about. I asked them, they're just confused.
I think that, but I mean, the thing is that I get that, but I do also think it's not like we know nothing. Like that's an exaggeration. We are like, even if you've got wrong definitions, which brings me to my next question, like, that man is a thumb haver. It's not like man doesn't have thumbs, right?
Right.
That is something unique about us. And so it's just a kind of, have you read Flowers for Algernon?
No. Sounds familiar though.
Yeah. So it's just about a guy called Gordon, and he's got like 68 IQ, and he's writing in a diary, and he goes through a medical experiment which transforms him and shoots him up to like, over 180 or like 200 IQ, and you get to see his changes as he writes in his diary. But I feel like it's a bit of that, we're kind of starting as Gordon. We're all Gordons. We're just in there writing, I don't like this, I am idiot. And then maybe to transform yourself is an achievement in that. Anyway, everyone has the capacity to do it, but we all start as Gordons, and somehow we're all just surviving and, eating cupcakes and walking around Earth and doing stuff. But
that's why I bring up Malcolm X sometimes, because he was that Gordon level, just getting by, petty crime just because it's easy, no philosophical view on anything. He didn't really even care to think about racism or anything. Just he did what he did, and did what he felt was right, and that was that. But he went through like intense conceptual retraining by reading and writing so much that he did attain a greater clarity of thought and precision in thinking and ability to speak and everything. Like his entire self improved, like on a deep level.
Yeah, you mentioned him a couple of times. I actually wrote down his one of, I think, what was the book I wrote down? Anyway, I'll look it up later. But I looked up. There's only one autobiography, right? I think I found the right one, the one that you were referring to. I did label it. Let me just check. Because I was going to read it. I'm really wanting to go through the Socrates stuff too. I think it'll be, based on what you're saying, it'll be very good for me. So my books. Next. Yeah, so I put down, oh, where is it? I don't know. But anyway, there's only one autobiography, right? Malcolm X.
One autobiography, yeah.
The auto by Alex Haley. That's the one I'm looking for, yeah?
I don't know. He wrote the one himself. There's that one.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll look for it later and I'll ask you. Anyway, I'll do it later. No point
Sure.
doing it now. But yeah, I did mark one. All right, so next thing is this. This is my question. I don't agree with what she's saying, or I'm not following it, but I want to get your thought on it. And then I've got this little concept to talk about.
You already sent into prepositions. Oh, what's your disagreement?
Well, why propositions rest not only on their relation to the facts he asserts, but also the truth or falsehood of the definitions of the concepts. This part.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Which rests on the truth or falsehood. No, this part. Why, like, if we're talking about, I'll have to find, maybe it's somewhere in here. I think it's, let me just think where it would be. White. Oh, there we go. Here. Here's the relevant quote. Okay. This is what I didn't get. In light of this, she talks about, like, what about a man's type of consciousness? Oh, wait, maybe. Yeah, so she's talking about there is no difference between such definitions and those chosen by individuals who define man as a Christian or Jewish or Mohammedan animal or white-skinned animal or animal of exclusively Aryan descent. No difference in epistemological principle or consequence or practical consequences or psychological motive. So she talks about the guy who's saying man is the possessor of a thumb or man is a language having animal. And she says there's no difference between someone who says that in motive, in practical consequences, between someone who defines man as a white-skinned animal. But, like, what I'm confused about is why does the truth of a proposition rest on the designation of essential characteristics? Like, if I say man is a thumb having animal, it's not true that man is like this. That's still true. He is a thumb having animal. It's just some epistemological thing that according to this epistemology that I've defined incorrectly. But man has a thumb. Man writes poetry. Man speaks languages. Those things are true. They're characteristics. Man sometimes is a white-skinned animal. So what is, that's why I'm confused of why she's saying if you designate essentials incorrectly, suddenly you're false.
I'm trying. That's a tricky one. I see what you're saying. There are clearly true aspects of that definition. I mean, it's not invalidated that man has thumbs. The essential. The truth depends on. I'm not sure how to answer that. I think it'll take me a long time to figure that out.
We're gonna get to that later as well.
Yeah.
All right. So here's my counterpoint to all of this, right? All of this stuff, which actually ties in quite well with something she said about first level concepts. So we can go to that, but there's a concept called expert-induced amnesia. Whether or not it's valid, I don't know, but he is describing something that I think sounds real to me. So he's talking about a point where you train knowledge so well, like a golfer or a poker player or a trader, and that you struggle to explain the decisions that are made using that knowledge. And it's when knowledge is so deeply ingrained, you can sometimes forget the steps and details it took to learn it so well. And that's why he says this concept explains why experts sometimes make terrible quotes. They're using concepts, but they can't tell you what the hell they are. And so that kind of counters to me, like, this. Because, okay, well, I guess this is possible. Actually, this has yeah, she does speak about this in somewhere here. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Yeah, look at this. That's funny. Okay. Let me see if I can fit that on the screen. Can you still read that?
Yes.
All right. So she's saying above level of conceptualized sensations and metaphysical axioms. Every concept requires a verbal definition. Paradoxically enough, it is the simplest concepts that most people find hardest to define. The concepts of perceptual concretes for which they deal daily, such as table, house, man, walking, tall, number. Good reason for it. Chronologically, they're the first concepts man's form and grasp and can be defined only verbally by means of later concepts. For example, table, one grasp table before one grasp flat level surface supports. Most people, therefore, regard formal definitions of unnecessary and treat simple concepts as if they were pure sense data to be identified by means of ostensive definitions, that is, by simply pointing. There is a certain psychological justification for this policy. Man's discriminated awareness begins blah, 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 so thoroughly automated in men's mind that they seem to require definitions, and man has no difficulty identifying the reference of such concepts ostensibly.
Yeah.
Although when we're talking about an expert, it's not like he's necessarily relying on, ostensive concepts. I don't know.
I mean, they could become ostensive in the sense, like, I think I remember mentioning something like this once. Like, if you understand, or maybe you can develop concepts of like advanced in physics, like quantum entanglement, and it might be hard to imagine that if you're new to it. It's so abstract, but you almost can use it enough times and become such an expert in it that it's almost ostensive. It's just you got a single image of what it is. It's almost like immediate. That's the kind of thing I think can happen.
But in that case,
As
you
if
would
it
be
were
able to explain it. Like someone would be able to explicitly unravel all of it. And you'll be like, I'm confused by this. And the person might say, this is too abstract, actually, now that I'm having this conversation. Unless we have a specific example we can refer to. I'm not going to go there because otherwise I'll get caught up in.
You still might have trouble teaching it. And that's one thing. Teaching it is a whole different process. I mean, that's a matter of being able to retrace your steps and everything you learned. And teaching is always difficult because it's not just understanding what's true and being able to define it in yourself, but also to bring the other person through that developmental process. You can't just give them the answer and expect that to be there. I mean, it might work and be truly the right way to think of it, but you can't just teleport there. You have to bring your student there.
Well, so what do you think of this then?
That's probably actually Feynman, but I kind of disagree.
Oh no, so that is Feynman, and then I've got an Einstein one for you as well.
Yeah.
The Einstein one, because now both of these guys are disagreeing with you. There's something to this.
I think it could maybe reflect even better understanding than an even higher degree. I mean, being an expert, I think the best experts of all can explain it too simply. They know, they're able to explain all this, that they're able to validate it even. And in their own mind, they probably could act as if it's ostensive and it's the easiest thing in the world. And they also know how to validate it, how to use how to retrace their steps in confirming it's true. I think that would be further understanding.
Weren't you just saying the opposite though? Like you can get to a point where this is the expert induced amnesia idea where you say it's viewed like you understand something so well that it's you said like it's like a what single thing in your mind, but that kind of doesn't that contradict this what you just said now?
I don't think so. I mean, you could have that singular thing and then be able to reduce it or break it apart into the pieces, to all the abstractions that make it up. And I think that'd be a further level of understanding if you can do that. If not only do you have the singular thing, but you can break it apart, that's even more understanding if you can do that.
So it seems like we've got two contradictory perspectives here. So on the one hand, it seems like, you know, you need to know explicit definitions in order to make use of and retain, and that is part of what understanding is. Feynman says it, Einstein says it, Ayn Rand is talking about it, and yet we're here looking at something called expert-induced amnesia, which sort of relates to this idea that you can use something so much that you forget the steps to get there.
I would question that it's actually forgotten. That's what I'm questioning, I guess. Is it really forgotten? I don't know if I believe that. I mean, I would need more evidence to, I mean, then I would have to change my belief probably, or change something about what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I'm skeptical of that.
Of expert-induced amnesia?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Sounds
there's
like some term from psychology, eh?
I'm not sure. I need to read into that. It sounds like it might be useful, but maybe not. Like, do we really want to say it's forgotten? I think Rand would argue it's not forgotten. It's just automatized. It's just not ignored, but abstracted away. Like when she talks about forming concepts, it's not that the measurements disappear and are forgotten. They're just set aside. They're like not given direct attention.
So why do we need you know, like why are these definitions so essential? I don't understand why it's so essential to designate and then remember the essential characteristic. Like why can't you just be one, you can forget it anyway, but why can't you just go, this is what, you know, you just remember characteristics. Like a lot of my concepts are like that. Like, oh, man does this and that, you know, man is I now say man's a rational animal, but, you know, before that it'd be like, oh, man is this thing that, you know, eats and washes dishes and like watches TV and, you know, like that's probably how I thought that was my concept of man. And so, but I still was alive and I was still like, you know, able to cook food and function on some level. So what exactly is going on? And she says like, it's not like I was walking around in a world of illusion because I didn't have a proper designation of the essential characteristics of man. So what am I not getting here?
I mean, the purpose seems to be one, condensing, and two, that the more centralized the concept is, the easier it is to work with. I mean, if you've got the essential captured, whether or not you can identify it explicitly, if it's there, if it's captured, you're going to be reasoning with that in mind. You're going to be explaining things with the essential in mind. You're not going to be explaining, say, why do people make families? Like, you wouldn't be start explaining with their thumbs. If you have an essential understanding, or at least if you capture the essential, it'll be talking about thinking of reasons or justifications or things like that. I think that you'll at least be thinking in the correct terms.
Can you try give me a concrete example of how you might think? We'll take two different people, one who's designated humans as rational animals, another one who's, I don't know, what it could be another concept. Can you think of an example where it's really obvious how damaging it might be to have an incorrectly assigned, but an incorrectly designated essential characteristic? What the hell is the difference between assign and designate? I don't know. Assign, designate.
I think of them as the same.
Okay.
Synonyms. One's more formal, in my opinion. Which would I? An example. Can I come back to you on that one?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
want to
yeah.
give a good one. I'll think
Yeah.
about it and give you a good one.
I mean, we've got time. Don't worry. Look, I'm
Yeah.
I'm 20% through, and
Yeah.
here we go. So
Yeah, I'll give you a good answer because I want to. It's an example I want to work with because I think that's a good question to ask. So I
all right.
want to give